hate speech is essentially doing something. It's not just speech, it's inherently discriminatory or something similar, which is in a lot of aspects illegal already. It's illegal in education, in schooling. So I don't see a reason why it should be allowed in public places, because it contributes to, like, for example, racial inequality, and that's one of the reasons it shouldn't be allowed. A lot of other countries, for example, Canada, Germany, or France, have already outlawed hate speech, or at least not protected it under free speech. And, well, actually, most economically advanced democracies have. So I think that's just one point that speaks for my view. So if that's all right with you, you can start to like counter what I just claimed, or bring your own like arguments. I don't care.
Okay. So hate speech is a legal term. I assume we're not talking about anything about morality or things like that. And so I regard hate speech as a legal term. And oftentimes, hate speech, in my opinion, can be seen as something that's extremely subjective. If hate speech, going by your definition, is public speech that expresses hate or encourages violence towards a person or group based on something such as race, religion, sex, or sexual orientation, then it seems to me that such things as hate or even encouraging violence can be interpreted as something that's subjective, which is the problem with the idea that hate speech is not free speech. It becomes where, oh, if I don't like something, then or if I feel like it's targeting me in a specific way, in a specific way that I don't like, that person is expressing hate towards me, or that person is expressing hate towards my group, and it's therefore unacceptable and should be restricted by law. So another issue that I have with what you just said is that other countries, I guess developed Western nations, have restricted hate speech. I'm going to put quotations around that. And therefore, I guess everyone else should do it too, which I think is problematic thinking, because just because a group of other countries do it doesn't mean that you should do it. It's essentially like a bandwagon fallacy. Um, you know, uh, there's a lot of things that other countries do that aren't necessarily logical. So, for example, in the UK, they ban you having a potato peeler in your pocket. Does that mean other countries should ban you having potato peelers in your pocket? You get the idea of it. Um,
Oh,
so, yeah, go ahead.
all right, Patty. So then let's just ignore other countries. Let's just not care about that argument then. That's fine with me. So I think you've expressed a concern that hate speech isn't properly defined, and it could lead to like a slippery slope, for example, saying that a country's government just censors government critical views and just says, well, it's hate speech. And so like you're concerned about the lack of like a definition, right? Like the lack of a distinction between offensive speech and hate speech, for example, right?
Well, you've already given your definition of hate speech, which is which is a definite right, comes the Google definition essentially, and I'm fine with working with that. I don't, it's not so much that it becomes a slippery slope. It's that sure your definition is really vague, but I'm fine working with it.
All right. So what exactly is the issue then? Could you like repeat it?
Oh, can you? So, what would be an example of hate speech to you? I guess.
For example, I would say that saying all N-words should die is hate speech.
Okay. And why shouldn't people be allowed to say that?
Because saying that all N-words should die doesn't contribute to public discourse in any way that is positive. It just
Is it public discourse?
well, I'm not familiar with the definition of public discourse. Let me just say that it's doing something. It's not just speech, it's doing something. It contributes to racial inequality, it contributes to propagating racism, which is something that is very negative in my opinion, which is why I think that it shouldn't be acceptable to say such things.
So while it may not be, it's fine to say that it's not acceptable. It's another thing to say that government should step in and arrest a person for saying all N words should die. I mean, I'm a black person. I wouldn't like if someone said all N words should die, but that person saying that all N words should die is actually not keeping me from doing anything that I want to do within society. It's one thing for an individual or even a small group like the KKK to hold a position like this. It's another thing to say that it's actually keeping people from, you know, uh, living life. So for example, if you if this one person were to say it, it's a lot different from a group going and actually burning a cross on your private property, right?
Patty, are you claiming that people being allowed to say all N-words should die without repercussions does not have an effect on you whatsoever?
It might hurt my feelings, but hurting my feelings shouldn't be against the law.
I don't think it just hurts your feelings. I think it propagates, for example, institutional racism.
Institutional racism is propagated by people who may have those views, but still people having their personal views. So a person can actually be racist and not actually be engaging in racism within an institution. People have biases all the time, while and it doesn't mean that they are actually engaging in that institution. As long as they are not actually violating my rights, I don't care what they say. But I don't care what they say behind closed doors or whatever, as long as they're not violating my rights.
Well, I think they are violating your rights by saying that you should die. They're actively saying that you don't have the right to live.
What right are they violating though?
Your right to live.
No, I'm still living. Them saying that isn't violating my right to live. I'm still alive.
Well, I don't know how to proceed from here. Do we want to go to another point maybe?
Okay, yeah. What is hate?
Um, I don't have a definition of hate in my head right now. I'm sorry.
Is saying gay people shouldn't be allowed to get married hate?
Um, I don't know if it's hateful. I think hate is something more direct than that.
Should people be allowed to express intense dislikes of something or someone?
Depends on if they have a reason for them or not. I don't think there's a valid reason for someone to say all N-words should die. I think it would be something different to say, I don't know,
If
N-words are somehow different to other people or something. Maybe if you could back something like that up,
if
then I would
my
understand it. But simply claiming they all should die is not something that like has any substance to it in my opinion.
well, according to Supreme Court, saying something like "they all should die" isn't even an actual encouragement of violence itself. Saying something like that is still just a thought. Them going out of their way, going to say, on January whatever, I'm going to pick up an AR-15 and I'm going to kill a bunch of black people in a church. If they were to say that, then that actually is an incitement to violence. But saying I don't like these people. Oh, so we can use a good example. If you had a neighbor, your neighbor didn't cut their grass. They were really shit at cutting their grass. And um you say you should how can I say? Oh yeah. So you get into an argument with this neighbor and you say drop dead. Is that an incitement to hate? And is that an incitement to violence?
I'm not sure honestly, but in my definition of hate speech, uh, so what you just did was I think you confused offensive speech with hate speech.
But that's
Uh,
what
I
a hate speech is offensive speech. There is
I
actually
think there's a
there's no
difference.
no
Uh,
there isn't.
I think hate speech is uh, insulting someone or expressing hate towards someone based on their race, based on their religion, based on their sexual orientation.
How is that
Offensive.
not offensive?
No, no. Can I finish, please?
Yes, sorry, I'm
Offensive
sorry.
speech is simply saying you're an asshole without saying you're an asshole because you're black or something like that.
How do you
There's like a
define
difference between offensive speech and hate speech.
offensive?
It's not rooted in racism or sexism or anything like that. It's simply saying, it's simply insulting.
But being offensive is to cause someone to feel deeply hurt, upset, or angry. It's aggressive. It's attacking. You know, it's hostile. And to say something like "you dumb niggers" is definitely offensive. But
Yeah, of
why?
course, but that's an extra step. That's offensive speech with the added step of trying to offend someone because of their race, and that's literally hate speech.
Be, so if I sorry, I'm reading the comments. If I if someone okay, if someone were to say my neighbor, I'm sorry. Yeah, I won't say that again. I just had to use this as an example. If someone to say my neighbor is the dumbest person alive, I can't stand them. I wish they would drop dead. How is that not crossing into the realm of hate speech? You're actually you're talking about your neighbor in their most intrinsic form. You're defining them as dumb and annoying and who they are as a person, you know, not being black or any other minority or or a sexuality, of course, is a part of a person's identity, but
All
so is
right, all
possibly
right.
being dumb or annoying or whatever. I don't understand how suddenly you've crossed into, well, hate speech isn't even offensive speech.
Patty, could you tell me the example about like the exact formulation again
Which one?
about the neighbor? I
If
forgot. I'm
you
sorry.
Yeah, if you had a neighbor and they never cut their grass and it made their house look really crappy and your house is right next to them and you finally walk up to your neighbor and you say you need to cut your grass and your neighbor mouths off to you and you yell at them, you're an idiot, drop dead.
All right.
How is that not
So
how's that not a
oh,
hate speech?
all right. By our definition, you didn't tell your neighbor to drop dead because of their race or because of their religion or because of their sex or because of their sexual orientation, but you did it because they're apparently not capable at cutting grass. So by our definition, that's not hate speech.
Oh, but I don't know why they're incapable of cutting grass. They could, as far as I'm concerned, they could have some sort of disability. They could have some sort of allergy. They may be autistic, and where cutting the grass actually makes them freak out. It's too much sensitivity on them. There could
But
be a
you're
whole
not
bunch of
directly claiming, you're not direct, sorry for interrupting.
yeah.
You're not directly claiming that they should drop that because of their sex or their religion or anything like that. You're simply saying they should drop that because they can't cut grass.
Sure, they can't cut grass, but if they say to me, what if they say to me, I can't do this, this, and this because I'm autistic, and I say, I don't care, drop dead, go, you need to cut your grass. Is that still not hate speech?
If you want them to drop that simply because they're autistic, it's hate speech. If
What
they,
if
you
they
want,
if they accuse me of hate speech? Do you think that they would be correct?
I'm sorry, I kind of feel gish galloped right now. Like I'm not being
How?
able. I don't know. This argument seems very complex to me. Could we like try to break it down somehow?
All right, okay. Let's say they worship grass, all right? Because one of the things is race, religion, sex, or sexual oriented. Let's say they worship the grass or they're nature files and they like to have sex with dirt. And I say, that's disgusting. You are disgusting. People like you should not have rights. Is that hate speech? Should I
Yeah,
go to jail for that?
yeah.
Really? I feel like that's absurd.
I mean, if it's a valid religion that a lot of
Oh wait,
people,
what is a valid religion? There's a lot of religions that aren't recognized under the United States government. Does government make them valid?
you just interrupted me. If it's a
I'm
valid
sorry.
religion that many people follow and that has like, I don't know, proper scripture maybe, if it is like recognized by the general majority of people to be a valid religion like Christianity or Buddhism, then I think that saying because you're a member of that religion, you should drop that, then that's definitely hate speech. If it's just something made up, then I don't think that's hate speech.
So why shouldn't it? So if I'm totally fine with accepting that it's hate speech because that's not what we're debating. We're debating if hate speech is free speech. So why shouldn't they? Why shouldn't I be allowed to say, "Wow, that's really dumb. You should like drop that for worshiping grass"? Why should I have to go? Why should I go to jail for that? What rights am I violating of the other person?
You're violating the religious rights of the person that worships grass.
So do you uphold the belief that someone criticizing religion should be should go to jail?
Someone criticizing religion. No,
What
if you
actually
criticize,
defines
no. If you criticize religion, if you say, for example, I don't know, uh, Ju how do you say, Judaism seems very far-fetched to me. That's not hate speech, but saying I think you should drop that because you're Christian. I think all Christians should drop that. That's hate speech.
what is an expression of hate? I want you to what is the expression of hate? I want you to define because we're not just we hate speech isn't just encouraging violence, but hate speech is an expression of hate. Can you define expression of hate?
I can't define expression of hate. English is not my first language, and I'm not very comfortable with definitions.
Would you accept that an expression of hate is an intense dislike?
It depends. You can intensely dislike things for a reason, but I think one attribute of hate speech is that it's not a valid criticism. It's literally just uh,
What is a
insulting.
what's a valid criticism?
For example, saying that. Can you give me an example which I could validly
Oh,
criticize?
I can't because I can't because this is kind of the problem is that defining hate speech, defining hate speech is so subjective. It's so based on someone's personal views of how they feel, and now you're going farther into saying that that and then what hate is or expressing that you don't like it, you don't think that it should even exist, is now a is now even violating a person's right to even practice or be the way that they are, which I don't think is the case at all. If I express that I don't that I love religion, I am religious, but if I expressed that I intensely dislike religion, I hate religion, and I said that Christianity or Islam or whatever is dumb and it shouldn't exist, and the Crusades were the right way to go, or whatever, or Christian persecution was the right way to go. Like if I were to say that, I'm not actually violating anybody's right to practice. I'm
Yeah,
just
of course,
expressing
that's
a
not hate
view.
speech. Saying Christianity is stupid is not hate speech.
Yeah, but that's not all that I said. What I also said was like, oh, this is like no different from saying that the like someone saying that the Holocaust was correct. The persecution of Christians or Islamic people or Hindus was the correct thing to do or the right thing to do. It's no different from saying that the Holocaust was the right thing to do. Yeah, you're going to be hurting some people's feelings. You're engaging in
Well, in Austria,
hold
you're not gonna.
you're
In,
you're engaging in offensive speech, but you're not violating the rights of those people to actually practice it.
can you explain to me then why in Austria, where I live, if you say the Holocaust was the right thing to do, you get arrested?
Because your government values people's feelings more than free speech.
All right, let's get into people's feelings. Um, if if you say all N-words should drop dead, do you just validate? Sorry, do you just wait? What did you just say about feelings? I forgot the formulation. Sorry.
I said that I said that your feelings being hurt isn't a violation of your
All
right.
right, yeah, exactly. So if you say all N-words should drop dead, are
Uh-huh.
you are you just hurting someone's feeling,
Yeah.
or are you going against a group of people's right to exist?
even going even going against the people's rights to exist still is not violating someone's rights. So you having a personal
Well,
opinion,
sorry,
you
violating
having
someone's rights to exist is not violating someone's rights. What?
yeah, like okay, so the KKK exists in the United States. Sure. They don't they likely do not believe that I should be alive, that I should be allowed to live. However, the KKK is not violating my if the KKK came to my house and was harassing me and whatever, then you take action because now it's actually encroaching onto my private property, it's encroaching onto my person. But the KKK writing on Stormfront, a forum for white supremacists,
Yeah, I know what
is not
Stormfront
violating.
is.
Yeah, it's not violating my rights to live. So when
Well,
people
I think to a certain extent it does, because if there's people out there in like public discourse that say things like that, they're actively motivating people to actually go to your house and like harass you.
the
So it's
KKK has the KKK has multiple parades every year in a couple of different states, and every year we all make fun of them. So the KKK, they are allowed their speech. We know what the beliefs of the KKK are, even if they don't outwardly express them at every march that they're at. We know what their views are, but that doesn't mean that their personal views are actually violating my rights.
all right. Yeah, I think that's exactly the point where we disagree. I think they do violate your rights by saying that. I think that a person should have the right to not have to deal with people saying exactly that.
Can you repeat that? I'm sorry.
I think if I were a black person, I have
Mhm.
the right to exist in a world where I'm not confronted with people saying N-word should die.
You do have a right to that. It's called right. It's called your association rights.
Well, but you said that people who say all N-words should die have the right to say so because of freedom of speech. So
They
there's like a
do.
conflict. There's like a conflict in rights there. Like
No, it's not. So
can I please finish? One person
sure.
has the right to say all N-words should die, and one person has the right to live in a world where there's no people saying all N-words should die. So now I'm asking you, which right is more important? The right
My
to
right.
say no, can I
Yeah,
please finish?
I was going to answer.
Which right is more important? The right to say racist things or the right to live a life without persecution?
So free speech is far more important than my feelings. I have the right to association. So here's the great thing about things like the free market, for example, Twitter, Facebook, whatever, they all have stipulations on how people can act on their social media. I have the ability to block people that I think are annoying to me. I have the ability as someone who owns private property to say, I don't want so and so on my private property. I have the right to go somewhere and not be harassed in person. I
All
have the
right.
right to not I have the right to do those things. I do not have the right. So if someone is saying something, say someone's in a public place or the KKK decided to march down Warren Avenue or whatever in Detroit, Michigan or something, I have the right to leave the area. And you know what else I have to do? I have the right to counter protest. My feelings are not enshrined in the law. And there's a reason why. My feelings can be hurt for any reason at all. That doesn't make my feelings worth being enshrined in the law. I think someone's right to speech, no matter how disgusting it is far more important than my personal feelings, seeing as I have every ability to walk away from the situation.
You equate persecution with having one's feelings
Now
hurt.
here's a big question. I asked you earlier: is saying gay people shouldn't be married hate speech? You said no. Are you changing that?
Well, I asked you a question too, and you didn't answer it.
Oh,
So,
what's the question?
which right is more important? The right
I
to
did
say
answer.
racist. You equated in your answer. You equated persecution with someone's feelings being hurt. You did that.
Because someone can feel persecuted and it's just their feelings being hurt.
Do you think persecution can go beyond someone's feelings being hurt?
Of course. So there are obviously limits. Free speech stops when you actually start to encroach onto someone's private property or their autonomy. But no one's violating my private property or my autonomy by holding views that I dislike.
But people are inciting the public to do exactly that.
Okay. So who's inciting the public? Oh, well, I
If I
still want you to answer your
propagate,
question too, by the way. So is saying gay people shouldn't be allowed to get married hate speech?
as I said, it depends on whether you have valid reasons to think so.
It doesn't matter if the opinion is valid. The opinion's the opinion.
All
Should
right.
gay marriage is legal in the United States. And if I said gay people, I believe gay people should not be allowed to get married, is that hate speech or not?
It depends on your background.
What? What do you mean?
It depends on if you just hate gay people or if you have any valid criticism.
How
If
do
you
you
just
define a
hate,
hate? How do you define a hate of gay people? If I say that gay people should not be allowed to get married because homosexuality is unnatural or it's perverse or it's something that is not in within God's creation, I mean, I would be called hateful by a variety of people. Why should I be in jail because people define that as hateful and their feelings got hurt and they felt persecuted?
I'm not sure actually. I'm not sure.
Well, I don't understand because earlier you stipulated that free speech your free speech stops when the other party begins to feel persecuted or that their rights are now being violated. Well, gay marriage is a right in the United States. Me saying gay people shouldn't be allowed to get married, me saying transgenderism is a mental ill if I were to say that, which me saying that transgenderism is a mental illness or something, if I were to say that, I would certainly be labeled hateful. I don't understand why you seem hesitant to label it as hateful. Now that even though you already stipulated that it takes the other party their subjective feelings to actually feel persecuted.
All right, let me ask you something.
Yeah.
I think we haven't properly discussed the distinction between offensive speech and hate speech. I think we've kind of like flown beyond that.
I don't make a distinction between them.
All right, yeah. So do you think there's any distinction between saying you're an asshole and saying all N-words should die?
No.
Any at all?
No.
None at all.
No.
All right, then
I
you don't
certainly think
seem to know what hate
certainly
speech
think
is.
I certainly think one involves no. Now, if I were to call, do you think it takes an intense dislike to call someone an asshole? Now, are you talking about like in a joking? So, if we were to talk about context, we can make distinctions between context, right? But if you're talking about in which someone is saying, "You're a fucking asshole," if someone's saying that, that expresses an intense dislike towards that other person, towards that person's very nature, their personality.
All
I
right,
don't.
Patty, let
Yeah.
me read to you again our definition of hate speech. It's
Okay.
public speech. Wait, sorry. Public
Hmm.
speech that expresses hate or encourages violence
Hmm.
towards a person or group based on something such as race, religion, sex, or sexual orientation. When I say you're an asshole, does that uh, express hate or encourage violence towards a person or
And
group based on something?
this is why I asked you to define expression of hate. And you
Well,
said that you couldn't do that. So I offered that maybe the expression of hate is an intense dislike. And I asked you if that's fine with you. You said you weren't sure. So we have two different contexts in which something can be defined as hate speech, one of them being expression of hate. And I even said earlier that I don't want this to just be a conversation about just about violence, because obviously the violence one is pretty easy. We can go through that easy. But now hate speech is also defined as an expression of hate. And I asked you to define that and you weren't comfortable defining that.
All right, so if we make this about definitions now, I think now is as good as ever to end the debate.
Well, this hate speech is a legal term. And if we're going to talk about hate speech, you have to, in my opinion, you have to know your definitions because it's a legal term.
Well, I did provide a definition of hate speech, and now
Yeah,
you're asking
and
me
it,
to define hate. So now I'm gonna ask you to define uh, the word person.
you, I'm sorry, what do what?
Well, you asked me to define the word hate, right?
I asked you to define the expression of hate.
Oh, the expression of hate.
Yeah, I mean, you can define hate, the expression of hate. Yeah, that's what I mean. That's what hate speech is. It's an expression of hate.
Oh, so we do know what hate speech is now.
What? I mean, okay. I thought you kind of, I thought you wanted to debate this, so I mean, I asked you for you. Do you know if can you define an expression of hate?
No, I can't.
Okay.
Can you define it, Patty?
Yeah, an intense dislike of something. Do you think if someone says, I don't believe in gay marriage because homosexuality is not of God, does that would that be an expression of an intense dislike of something?
I'm not sure, honestly. I'm not sure about anything anymore.
I understand. Tropical, you're typing hate speech wrong. You wrote hate speech, hate speech. That's what you wrote.
All
So, do
right,
you want
so
to
if
continue
I
this or
if I
okay?
understand correctly, your main point is still that like hate speech is too vague to be defined in a legal context.
I think hate speech is extremely subjective, and this conversation kind of helped show that.
All right, so if a person murders another person,
Hmm.
we ask a jury to define certain things, to categorize the murder, whether it's been done in a fit of rage, or if it's been done like planned ahead, for example, or something like that. So we already expect something like that uh, to like categorize certain actions into whether or not it's like planned ahead or like
Why do
emotional. So I think that in like a due process in a court, we already expect jurors to classify exactly that.
well, why don't we call all murder? Why don't all murders be classified as hate speech as a type of hate crime, for example? Hate speech and hate crime are essentially synonymous as far as I'm concerned. Why don't we? I mean, why don't we label them all hate crimes?
My point was simply that juries already have the capability to decide between offensive speech and hate speech, for example, which you can't.
No, we already went through. Like, what's any difference between offensive speech and hate speech? Hate speech is inherently offensive.
Yeah, but hate speech has an extra step, which is it's offensive speech, but on the basis of sex or religion or whatever.
Why wouldn't then why wouldn't an offensive comedy or offensive speech, even if it's just for like the sake of a conversation, why wouldn't that be described as hate speech?
Because
You
it's
could
under
do
the guise of comedy.
no,
That's a
you
completely
can do the
different thing.
same. You could do the same thing. So one's comedy. This has happened so many times. Like so for example, like Ricky Gervais or what's the other guy? He's dead now, but he used to like talk mad shit. Like and he used to like get in trouble with people. Like he gave offensive speech all the time. Some of it directed at blacks, gays, Jews, all sorts of people. Why shouldn't that be labeled as hate speech? because the context seems fitting enough. Like, what if that's his actual personal view, but he's just using it as comedy? Like, why shouldn't we just go ahead and like charge him for something just in case? Like, really?
Well, if
Because
he
he
did it
could.
in a comedic
Thousands
setting,
thousands of people listened to him. Thousands of people thought he was funny. He was great. Who's to say that he's not contributing to the I hope I'm using this word correctly, but the zeitgeist of like people perpetuating offensive and mean narratives about minorities.
if it's in a comedic setting, that's a completely different thing.
Well, that just sounds like a scapegoat.
How so?
It's comedic, so it's not offensive enough to be. If this was a regular person just saying it, I mean, why should he get away with it?
Because a regular person, if a regular person says it in a completely different context, the context of comedy is not there.
Who's who's to say? What if someone doesn't understand the context?
I'm not following.
What if someone doesn't understand the context? What if someone decides that they didn't think it was funny? That their feelings are hurt. They felt persecuted as a person.
But you could still argue that it's in a comedic setting, and if someone just says on the street all N-words should die, you can't really argue that it's under the guise of comedy.
So what? What if it's not just one person? What if it's 300 people who are offended and felt persecuted? What if it's the whole religion that feels persecuted and offended? What if that one comedic sketch? What if that one comedic sketch caused somebody to go out and murder some people, some black people, and they said, "Oh, I watched this sketch, thought it was funny, but it spoke to me on a personal level." Should the person who had made that sketch does that now become hate speech?
Wait, Patty, I don't know what happened. It said he just left the server.
Oh, what?
Yeah, I just like saw a message on my screen. It said Janty left the server. Weird.
Oh, maybe it was an accident. I actually kind of feel like it might have been an accident.
Yeah, let me just shoot him a quick DM.
I hope I didn't. I hope I wasn't like talking over him or something. I didn't mean to like be rude or nothing.
No, I don't think so. I think you were very cordial.